Good afternoon. It used to be an uncontroversial statement. Bad boys are sexy. From iconic actors like James Dean and Johnny Depp to fictional characters like James Bond and Indiana Jones. The silver screen served us up the men your mothers probably warned you about. But now traditional masculine qualities are being called out as toxic, and many people want to cleanse the world of the men we love to hate. So, should we celebrate the opportunity to redefine masculinity, replacing bad boys with more positive role models? And if so, what does the new masculinity look like, and does it still have sex appeal? Or do we need to admit that danger is integral to desire, and to see the attempt to cleanse masculinity of all of its vices as a mistake that will leave everyone worse off? Well, to help us answer quite a lot of questions there, we have a stellar panel. Ella Wieland is a political commentator and journalist at Spiked, and she is the author of What Women Want: Fun, Freedom and an End to Feminism. Rowan Pelling is a journalist and broadcaster. She's the former editor of the Erotic Review, and in 2017 Rowan launched The Amorist, a magazine with the aim of countering the, quote, modern tendency to see sex through a purely functional prism. And Miriam François is an Anglo-French writer and broadcaster, and she has launched the website We Need to Talk About Whiteness.com with a view to encouraging conversations about whiteness and its cultural impact. So if you've been to one of these debates before, you'll know that we'll ask each of our speakers to begin with an opening statement or a pitch. And the question we're going to ask them to address is danger integral to desire? Ella, why don't you start us off?
Thanks. I mean, it's interesting that the word fiction was used in the introduction, because I think that anyone who's ever met a bad boy in real life knows that actually the fictional nature of that stance usually falls away. It's very rare that you do meet a real movie style bad boy. Usually they're rather more pathetic once you get past the facade. But I think the more serious point in relation to this, there's two serious points. One is that I think we use toxic masculinity today as a byword for masculinity. And I think that putting aside the very obvious points that there's a very real need and a great moral stance in condemning bad behaviour, whoever does it, bad boy or otherwise. I think what's happened is that we've problematized perhaps the good things of masculinity rather than taking them away and saying these things are positive outlooks, whether that be kind of stoicism, strength, risk-taking, and say that doesn't need to be masculine, but hey, let's look at it as a good form to base yourself around. Instead, we've trashed the whole idea. So I think we're interchangeably using toxic masculinity and masculinity, and I think that's a problem, because I think that we shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater in that respect. And the second point is that I think the desire to politicize people's very personal things like sexual desire is really less a comment on men, and in this instance, more of a comment on women. And I think that what we say, and when we're saying it's dangerous for us to promote the sexual desire or sexuality around the figure of bad boys, is that that's an inherent threat to women, and that women can't really handle tussling with a bad guy. And that, I think, is a far more dangerous prospect for women's freedom than any James Dean type figure.
Thank you very much, Ella. Miriam, is danger integral to desire?
Well, according to one of my favourite, very now famous sex therapist, Esther Perel, it absolutely is. You can't desire what you already possess, is what Esther Perel tells us. And so I do think there's an element to the conversation around bad boys, which is the idea of something that you can't quite fully grasp, and that is a definite fuel for desire in both directions. I personally prefer bad girls and bad women to bad boys, but and I think it's quite important to make a statement about who we think about when we think about bad girls and bad women. I mean, I don't think they're quite equivalent in when we talk about the characteristics that we think of when we talk about a bad boy. What do we mean versus what we talk about when we say a bad girl or a bad woman? I also just want to talk about if we could delineate what we mean a bit by the bad boys thing, because if we mean the person that your mum doesn't approve of, well, your mum may have certain views that maybe do need challenging, and so her version of what a bad boy is may not be worthy of full consideration. But if we mean, and I think we need to exclude from the bad boys category people who beat up their girlfriends. Can we just park that? They're not bad boys, they're just abusers. And so what we're left with is basically the conversation around narcissists, deeply selfish men for whom a very long time the system has allowed them to remain within the boy category, not having to take full account for their responsibilities, being able to be deeply selfish in their behavior, and basically being midwived into adulthood in a shape that looks like a man, but is basically a man-child, with all of the characteristics of a child when it comes to accountability, selfishness, etc. So yeah, sorry, I could go on, but yes, I think we infantilize men and facilitate their behavior when we refer to them as boys. You're a big man, you're just behaving like a child.
Okay, thank you very much, Miriam. So Rowan, is danger integral to desire?
Danger itself, I mean, no, clearly not. Now, I do love Esther Perel, but, I have a friend who said one night, I had a funny dream about Andrew Marr. We all know about weird crushes. My very first job, I was working for Ian Hislop. The amount of love letters he got every week. Now, Ian, I would say, who's a wonderful man and a great boss, was the very opposite of what we associate with a bad boy. But he had something, I'd say several qualities that are powerfully attractive. I think he has moral courage, and I think a lot of people find that very attractive. But of course, if we're going to, I think what Esther Perel's really saying is something that we do find very integral to desire is slight hint of unavailability, of something we have to work for, of something that maybe we're slightly frustrated by for a short while because we don't understand. So therefore, any celebrity can be the focus of desire. But I don't think danger itself has to be integral to desire. Having said that, of course, we do have this kind of strong cultural thread which promotes bad boys, and I sort of blame the Romantic poets. I actually blame lovely Lady Caroline Lamb, who famously said about Lord Byron that he was mad, bad, and dangerous to know, and that kind of sunk in, and that's what Mick Jagger's channeling, that's what bloody hell Russell Brand is channeling. It is quite a strong thing, and I've barely ever talked to a poet or a kind of rock musician who hasn't said on one level or another, if he's a man, that the reason, or comedians actually, the reason that partially they went into it was to get laid. And so, you do have a correlation there. And, women have bought into this. And I blame the Brontes too. Heathcliff is literally, when you first read it, you think, oh God, Heathcliff's so sexy. Because when you're young, you're kind of, peer pressure makes you go down certain channels of what you think sort of approved sexuality is. And people like Heathcliff look attractive until you've worked out he's kind of a wife beater. He's a narcissist. He's the psychopath we're talking about. He's awful. And then that eventually gets channeled into 50 Shades of Grey. Christian Grey, really offended me in every single way. He's basically a stalker and, a psychopath. And this was turned into a romantic fantasy for a lot of people. So, there is a sort of element of that. But I would say we're all morally complex. If we evolve properly, men and women, we start looking for another morally complex human being. Because if you're just looking for someone who is just virtuous, how are you going to deal with that? I'm a bit of a shitty human being. I find it easier to deal with someone who has the same level of moral complexity.
Thank you very much, Rowan. So we've already touched upon desire, but that brings us to our first theme.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.